So as I said, I will not have a presentation. I will have this one poster. Unfortunately, it's not fully shown, but I will have this poster because it shows a woman who has become a symbol of fight for press freedom in Georgia. And today I'm going to tell you the story of the local media, and also I'm going to tell you a story about how 24 years ago 2 young women in a small coastal city of Georgia stood up to power, and how their fight became a symbol of press freedom in my country, which, by the way, has just 3.5 million of population and unique language that only up to 5 million of people speak in the world. It is a story of courage, resistance, and what it takes to speak the truth when the truth itself becomes dangerous. So these are 2 women, my role models, and their names are Mzia Amaglobeli, the one that you see, and Eter. In 2001, at just 26 and 27-year-old, they founded a local newspaper in Batumi, Georgia. Not because they dreamed of owning a business, but because they were tired of lies and injustice. They left their jobs at local paper, frustrated by poor journalistic standards and political pressure that you can imagine, and decided to create something bigger, better, and honest, professional, independent newspaper. What started as a small act of protest became, over the years, a nationwide, respected, and truly independent media organization now running to online media outlets. To understand how extraordinary this is, you need to imagine Georgia in 2001, just a decade after regaining independence from the Soviet Union. The country was still recovering from wars, poverty, political chaos, and in the Autonomous Republic of Ajara, Batumi, the city that I'm from, there was a ruler, a man who treated the region as his private kingdom. So in the middle of this, 2 young women dared to publish the truth under the name of Batumelebi. Batumelebi means people from Batumi. But it was not long before the regime noticed, and a corrupt court cancelled the newspaper's registration on absurd grounds, claiming that someone else owned this name. The women faced harassment, pressure, and threats. But instead of giving up, they moved across the border of the Autonomous Republic and re-registered the paper under a safer legal structure, and now naming it as Gazeti Batumelebi, which means newspaper Batumelebi. So in many ways, Batumelebi has 2 birth dates, let's say so. First in 2001, and then again in 2003. Those early years were very dangerous. In 2003, Georgia experienced protests, rigged elections, what later led to Rose Revolution. But in Ajara, the real revolution came in 2004. And you can imagine this time in between was extremely difficult for local newspaper. Batumelebi's team lived through things that would look like scenes from a low-budget action film. The things that I was told by my colleagues, because back then I was too young, seemed so. Shots were fired at their office doors to scare them. Their journalists were followed, threatened, harassed, and it was on a daily basis. But they continued. Eventually, the regime fell, and after the fall of the regime, things got easier, but only for a moment, because when it gets easier for journalists, truly. The new government soon realized that Batumelebi's independence was a problem for everyone who would crave unchecked power. And still, the newspaper grew. By 2008, it had expanded its reach. To imagine 40,000 copies, it was more than they could cover only one region. However, our northern neighbor, Russia, invaded Georgia in 2008, and this invasion brought new dangers, new risks, and new stories no one else would dare to cover, that again brought threats to journalists who investigated things that government didn't want to be investigated. Gazeti Batumelebi survived this also and continued. They worked for their community, launched a media school for local youth. And for local youth, when I say, it meant a lot. And this media school was that I joined at the age of 16, and I'm still part of this great media outlet. There was another project, Press Cafe, hosting book readings, public discussions, exhibitions. This newsroom really became more than a newspaper for our small city, where nothing really happens except summer. But threats never stopped, unfortunately. In 2009, one of Batumelebi's investigative journalists and my mentor was blackmailed by Georgia's security service with forged private photos. They demand he spy on his colleagues and kill stories. Batumelebi didn't hide this case. They made it public and even exposed the agent behind this blackmail. This man was arrested years later by different government. In 2010, this local newspaper, Gazeti Batumelebi, took another brave step and launched a nationwide online media outlet called Netgazeti. We expanded work and now we have office in the capital of the country. But financially, things were never easy, even though we tried different business models. You can imagine how difficult it is to run independent journalism through wars, revolutions, and repressions. In 2012, government changed the game. What didn't change was our media organization. And by 2016, we unfortunately could not continue printing the newspaper. We tried to have a magazine for a year, but at the end, by 2017, it was also too expensive and Batumelebi became fully digital, now operating 2 online outlets, still fighting, still independent. Batumelebi's journalism was never just about news. We published documentary books on the local history, architecture and cultural heritage. It was also supposed to be our business model bringing some additional income. Back then, it was something like 2017, 18. Businesses still cooperated with us. They still brought advertisements. We also had, and we are having for many years, this special project that tells the stories of Soviet Union terror. The stories that are often untold, because even now, today, the archives, the state archives are classified in Georgia. There are lots of pain to reflect on and to tell. Unfortunately, our development plans were again put at risk because in 2022, our northern neighbor again launched terrible full-scale invasion in Ukraine this time, and at the same time, it intensified the hybrid warfare that it had in Georgia. I remind you that 20% of Georgia is still occupied by Russia, and we have Russian troops on our soil. So, unfortunately this time, our government chose the wrong side, and they turned against independent media. They weaponized advertising, pressured businesses, so now no more businesses are willing to cooperate with our projects. And what's the worst, they introduced laws designed to crush us, the so-called foreign agents laws, or Russian laws, that, as we call. In the middle of this, just before the parliamentary elections of 2024, Batumelebi published an investigation proving that the ruling party had amassed and sorted personal data of tens of thousands of voters, treating citizens like products in the catalogue. You could find everything. It was also proving that there is no dividing line between the party and the state. It was clear that elections would be very far from free and fair. After the elections, it didn't even take a month that the ruling party announced its victory and they also announced that they were halting or postponing Georgia's EU accession bid, something that most of Georgian population are supporting and striving for. This was responded with huge, massive protests that are going for over 120 days now, and daily people are blocking the country's main avenue in the capital. But unfortunately, as it happens in many such cases, government responded with violence. And violence against not only protesters, but also against journalists. Over 80 journalists were harmed. Their equipment was damaged. Many of them were beaten. Some of them required the surgery. And what is the most ironic is that some of the injured and beaten journalists later became announced as offenders and fined with administrative fines. Unfortunately, it was not all. Something unthinkable happened also, and on January 12th of 2025, Mzia Amaglobeli, the woman whose face is here and on my t-shirt today, was arrested. We say she's the first woman political prisoner since the Soviet Union collapsed in Georgia, but we were talking that probably she will not be the last, unfortunately. She was charged with politically motivated accusations that could imprison her for 4 to 7 years. These are not my words, you can check. These are about the politically motivated charges. These assessments were made by independent and objective observers and experts, the ones who better understand the law than me. What is most scary thing is that after arrest, she was humiliated, degraded, denied basic rights, and subjected to a system designed to break her. Yet, none of it is investigated so far, and she's not even given a victim status. It was not all. Just 20 hours later, Batumelebi's cameraman, was also arrested, right after identifying herself to police as a journalist of Batumelebi. His phone was wiped illegally. He spent 8 days in detention, also illegally. Justice became unreachable, and it is too much to process. So Mzia went on a hunger strike for 38 days. For us, and for me personally, it was the most terrifying time since the days of Russian invasion in Georgia. But she finally stopped, not because she thought that justice would come, but because she realized that her life, or our lives, meant nothing to this system. She remains in pretrial detention, assessed as unjustified, also by objective, independent, and professional observers. Every hearing is a cruel performance, sometimes lasting until midnight, with 12-hour prison transfer from prison to the court and back. And in one hearing, she said something that haunts me today, and I quote. She told the judge, and I want to quote, "If we take into consideration the fact that during Soviet repressions, people were executed or deported without even standing a trial, probably I have nothing to complain about. At least I'm getting the trials. So what if these hearings are just formality?" Her voice, heavy with irony and pain, has been ringing in my ears. On Monday there will be another hearing, and I will not be there, but she will be, and she will be surviving. And sometimes just surviving is a form of resistance. But now there's no time for emotions. And this is not just about one woman or one newspaper. It's about something bigger, about how fragile freedom becomes when truth tellers are treated like criminals. Batumelebi's story is not unique to Georgia. It is happening everywhere where authoritarianism rises. Today, Batumelebi is under direct threat, but so are others in Georgia. So are my colleagues who are present in this room today. The second founder of Batumelebi, Eter Turadze, can now also be facing possible criminal charges because of our government bringing another version of foreign agents law. This so-called foreign agents law is being reintroduced in an even more dangerous form, this time targeting not only organizations but individuals. It will bring criminal charges against directors and board members of the organizations who refuse to register as foreign agents. And I want to clarify that just registering is not the end. We don't know what will be next, so we refuse to register. It is expected to be adopted in the first days of April, so we'll see what happens. If you will ask me, we don't know what will be next. But we know one thing, we will not give up. I brought with me today 2 newspapers, which look like ours that we had, but these are not regular newspapers. These are the ones that we published 9 years later from closing our print. This is a special edition with cooperation with one of the Georgian media outlets, Indigo, and it tells the stories of political prisoners. It tells the story of our founder, of our CEO, of our journalist. I cannot yet bring you the story of victory, but if we will keep the positive attitude of this room today, I'm sure one day I will. Until then, I want to leave you with the words of Mzia Amaglobeli: fight before it's too late. As long as we exist and as long as we resist, we are on the winning side because truth is on our side. Thank you.